and parallel lines. So when we're looking at parallel lines, we want to make sure that we see these little arrows on our lines in the middle of our lines. That shows that these lines are parallel. So if you don't see these symbols, then your lines aren't parallel and you can't use these strategies or these patterns. So we're going to take a look at different types of angles when we're looking at parallel lines. So if the angles that represent these angles are sketched in a darker line, so we can see that here we have this darker line. So we have two parallel lines and a line that crosses through them. And in the darker section, we have what we call a Z. So they form the letter Z. And so the angles in the corner are equal. So that means that angle C and angle F are equal. Now we can also draw our Zs in different ways as well. So we could draw a Z going in the opposite direction. So that means that angle, so right now we have the Z going this way. But if we were to draw a backward Z, so a Z that looked like this, then angle D and E would also be considered alternate angles. So when we're identifying a Z pattern, it's important to remember the top and the bottom of the Z must be parallel lines. It's also important to use your imagination a little. Since a Z might be backwards, which we showed here, it could be sideways. So a few examples of the orientation of the Zs are shown on the right. So it could be a normal Z, it could be backwards, it could be sideways. So your Z can be in whichever direction makes sense for your diagram. So that's the first one. So alternate angles, we're going to refer to this year as a Z pattern. So the next pattern that you're going to look at refers to corresponding angles. And corresponding angles are also angles that are going to be equal, but these angles are going to be shown by using the letter F. So we can see here we have this F that is drawn on this shape. So that means that the angles in the corner of the F, so D and H, are equal. And as before, in the Z pattern, we can also have different orientations of that letter F. So we could have an F going backwards. So that means C and G are the same. We could have a G and F that is upside down. So F and B are the same. And we could also have an F upside down and backwards so that E and A are the same. So it's important for you to sort of visualize that F. So again, that F could be like this one right here, where it's upside down and backwards. So E and A are the same. So some of the orientations of the F are shown here, where we might have an F going, a regular F, a backwards F, an upside down F, sideways Fs. So this is going to be very helpful for you if you have colored pencil crayons or markers or even highlighters to help you sketch those different letters if that's helpful for you to visualize. And the next letter that you're going to refer to is the C. This refers to interior angles. So this time these angles aren't going to be the same, but these are angles that are going to add up to 180 degrees. So if we can see in this diagram here, we have this C pattern right here. We've sketched a little bit darker. So that means that D and F add up to 180 degrees. So D and F equal 180 degrees, and you could also have a C pattern going backwards. So I might have a C that looks like this, so then C and E also add up to 180 degrees. So those are supplementary angles that add up to C, or add up to 180 degrees within a C pattern. So remember, your C pattern can be in different orientations. The horizontal lines of your C must be parallel. So it could be a regular C, a backward C, and sideways Cs. So the F pattern, the Z pattern, and the C pattern are all patterns that we're going to use in this lesson. F and Z are the angles are equal. C, the angles add up to 180. So we're going to use that information to help us identify some unknown angles. And we're going to do that using the patterns that we learned. And sometimes you may approach the pattern in a different way than someone else. So for example, Z and F patterns, you could even do the X for those opposite angle theorems. So keep that in mind as well. So as long as you are getting the same value for your and the correct value for your angle. If you have looked at it and seen a different variation or a different letter pattern, then that's fine as well. So I'm going to start by looking at W. So I'm going to look at W using the X, so the opposite angle theorem. So W is equal to 48 degrees. So that's one of them. Okay, so unfortunately I don't have different colors available to me, so I'm just going to erase them and do another one. So now that I know W, I can use the Z pattern to find Y. So Y is also going to be 48 degrees because these two angles are exactly the same. I could also use W to find Z. So if I use W and draw an F, well, W and Z are now going to be the same. So Z is also equal to 48 degrees. So now I need to find X. And the way I find X might not use these patterns at all. So I might use X by using the angles on a straight line. So X I could use by finding 180, take away 48 degrees, so I can do X that way. So X is going to be 132 degrees. So I have found all of my missing letters. So I have W, X, Y, and Z, but I have found them in different ways. So I found W by doing opposite angle theorem. I found Y by using the Z pattern. I found Z by using the F pattern. And I used X by looking at angles on a straight line. So these are the reasons or the explanations for my angle measurements. So it's very important when you're doing these questions that you not only state what the angle is, but you tell me how you found that angle so I can verify that you are thinking about these in a manner that relates to our angle properties. So now let's take a look at example 2. So same thing, we want to look for these missing angles. And at this time, I'm going to use the C pattern. So I've drawn a C here at the top. So this tells me that X is equal, so 116 plus X is going to give me 180. Or I can find it by taking 180 and subtracting 116. And doing that will tell me that X has a value of 64 degrees. So I found that by using the C pattern. I can use a different C pattern as well. So if I take a look at the bottom two sets of parallel lines, I have another C pattern. So Y can be found by taking 180 and subtracting 134. So I'm using the second C that I see in this diagram. And 180 take away 134 is 46 degrees. So I use the C pattern for both of these, but I use different C's for each one. So example 3, my parallel lines are shown. So these are the ones with the arrows. And now I'm going to figure out what my values are going to be for each of these missing angles. So I'm going to start with A, and I'm going to draw a backwards Z. So this tells us that I can say that A is 55 degrees, and I found that by using the Z pattern. Now I'm going to solve for another letter or another variable, and I'm going to do that by using another pattern. And so I'm going to now solve for let's do my we could do C, for example, next if we wanted to. And C is and 115 form a straight line. So C is equal to 180, take away 115. So I'm using the properties of straight lines to help me figure out that missing measurement. So C is equal to 65 degrees. So now that I have my value for C and my value for A, let's see if I can figure out some other values in this property. So let's take a look at trying to figure out what B is. So now that I know C, I can find B by doing the F pattern. So I'm drawing a backwards F here. So this tells me that C and B are exactly the same. So B is equal to 65 degrees, and that's using the F pattern. And the last one that I want to try to find is D. And I can find D by looking at my parallel lines. So here's my D here. I can find D by, I need to be very careful when I'm finding D because I want to make sure that I'm using the properties that I know. So what I could do is I could find, well, I know that this form right here forms a triangle. So I can use my information about triangles to help me find the value of D. So this is one strategy that you could use. So I know that this inside angle right here is going to be the same as A. And so A, we said, was 55 degrees. So this angle right in here is 55 degrees. And I know that D is an exterior angle of my triangle. And when I have exterior angles of triangles, it's the same as adding the two opposite sides. So I know that D is equal to 55 plus 65 because that's using the exterior angles of triangles. So if you don't remember the actual acronym, feel free to just write down the property. So exterior angles of triangles will help us figure out what angle D is. And 55 plus 65 is equal to 120. And I'm using my degree symbols as my final answers to show that these are all degree measurements. So now I have my value of A, B, C, and D, and I used 4 different properties to figure that out. And again, if you saw a different variation of how to solve for these angles than I did, that's fine as long as you can justify your reason why that equals that measurement and that it's a correct reason. So the next, last two examples that we're going to take a look at, again, uses our parallel lines. So I have two parallel lines right here, and I want to find the values of E, D, F, H, and G. So I'm going to start by drawing an F pattern. Actually, a C pattern. Let's do a C pattern. So a C pattern can help us find out E. So E is equal to 180 take away 88, and that's using a C pattern. And that means that E is equal to 92 degrees. And if I know E, well, then I can find F, because I can use the opposite angle theorem, or what we can draw as an X. So E and F are directly across from each other, so F is also going to be 92 degrees, and that's our opposite angle theorem. So I can find D by using a Z pattern. So I'm going to draw my Z here. So D is going to be the same as 88. So D is 88 degrees, and I'm using the Z pattern to figure that out. So once I've found those ones in that section of my grid, let's move over to the right section of my grid. And we're going to try to find the value of G and H. So let's start with G by drawing an upside down F. So that tells me that the value of G is going to be the same as 141 degrees. And that's the F pattern. And now once I've found G, I can find H by using properties of straight lines. So H is 180 to subtract 141. So I'm using what I know about straight lines. And 180 subtract 141 is equal to 39 degrees. So be sure to not only give me your angle measurements, but also the property that you use to solve for that, so that I can verify your thinking is on the right track. And the last example that we're going to take a look at, so we have two parallel lines, so we can use, so the line that intersects or crosses through those two parallel lines we call the transversal, and so we're going to use these parallel lines to help us solve for some missing measurements again. So we're going to start by finding A, and I'm going to find A by using properties of straight lines. So A is 180, take away 134. So I'm using what I know about straight lines to help me solve for this measurement. And 180 take away 134 is 46 degrees. So once I found my measurement for A, I can find my measurement for B by drawing an F pattern. So A and B are exactly the same, so B is also 46 degrees, and I've used the F pattern to solve for that. So now that I've found B, well, I can solve for C. And I can solve for C by using the interior angles of a triangle. So it tells me that C is equal, so all the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So C is equal to 180, take away 73, and take away 46. So this is the interior angles of triangles. So you can refer to your sheets that looked at your properties of angles to help you out with that, if that's something that you want to refer to. And so doing that would tell you that this would be the angle sum of a triangle theorem. So you could either write it as ASTT, so angle sum of a triangle theorem, or you could just write interior angles of triangles. I'm happy with either or. They both mean the same thing, so if it's easier for you to think about them as just interior angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees, you can write that, or you can use the actual theorem. So C is equal to 180 take away 73 take away 46 is 61 degrees. And now that I found the value of C, I can use the opposite angle theorem to solve for E. So E is also 61 degrees because of the opposite angle theorem, or it creates an X, so the angles across from each other are the same. And lastly, I can solve for D by again drawing a letter F, and so D and C are also the same. So D is also equal to 61 degrees because of an F pattern. So those are just ways that you can solve for those missing measurements. So please put your angle measurement and the property that you use to solve for that missing angle using the strategies given to you, not only in today's worksheet, but any of the lessons that occurred in your previous work. So I hope that helps you solve for those missing angles. So again, feel free to draw, to color, to do whatever you need to do to help you see those patterns on your diagram itself so that you can find out those missing angle measurements. If you have any questions about today's lesson or any of the previous lessons, feel free to post your questions in the discussion boards in the virtual learning environment or send me an email.